Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Vince, and I've been doing admissions since 1989 and college counseling since 1998 in California.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a graduate of the University of Georgia, and she is getting her master's degree at North Carolina State University. This week in the news, we're back with Vince Garcia, and we're talking about college enrollment drops, even as the pandemic's effects ebb. This is an article that appeared in the New York Times by Stephanie Saul. A question from a listener is from Nina, and Nina wants to know. She says, my son has played the trumpet since the fourth grade when he started high school. He made the decision that he wants to stay in concert band, which I fully support. Because band meets 4 times a week, it limits his ability to take other courses. For example, our high school is offering an engineering certificate if you complete certain courses. Because of his choice to stay in band, he's not able to take many electives and has chosen among those that will fit in his core classes. Is this something that we are going to need to explain to his schools? And our interview is part 3 of 3 with John Ambrose, the director of undergraduate admissions at Michigan State University. And the topic is Understanding Michigan State University. And, of course, the John Ambrose interview on Michigan State will serve also as our college spotlight. Vince, what's new in sunny California, my friend?
Not much, just gearing up for a busy admission season and just looking forward to launching these seniors and getting a lot done before they go back to school.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're in the heart of writing season right now.
Yes.
You know, banging that out. And so, and I'm sure you find the same thing. You know, you've got your seniors, and then this is the time so many juniors start. Have you noticed, Vince, over the years that people are starting a little earlier?
Absolutely. I would say that most of my clients come in 9th or 10th grade. And when I started this in doing college counseling on the college side, students would start in September. I would get,
September of 12th.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they would come back to school and they would start. But now, no, 9th grade.
Yeah, so it's not that quite for me. But, the end of 10th is really popular, in which I kind of advocate for that. I advocate doing a couple consultation sessions before that, a few a year. Some people even do like 6 a year to make sure they're kind of staying on pace and developing, right courses they're picking and identifying some interests and things like that. But as far as like full-blown list building, I like to see at least 3 semesters of high school to really see how they're trending with their transcript. And for our admissions tip, we're taking advantage of Vince's wisdom. Vince, what do you have for us today?
So my admissions tip, demonstrated interest. Mark has talked a lot about that before. And I think that summer is a perfect time to make sure that you're demonstrating an interest. And the popular ways to do that, visit campus, put yourself on the mailing list, open your emails when they have something interesting for you, and do the virtual information session. And then I've seen my students become more excited about schools because they're actually taking the time to learn about this schools over time.
No, that's great. That's great, Vince. And, we're going to be doing a multi-series with Julia, and it's several articles that were written also in Forbes by Brendan Barnard about data and big data. And I was listening to Brennan pretty recently, and he was talking about a meeting that he had with one of the the big movers and shakers in the data analysis firms out there. A company called Human Capital Research Corp. They're one of the big 4 or 5 out here with Noel Levitz and EAB and I always forget the name of the other one. But they're one of the big 4. And he was absolutely blown away by literally the thousands of data points that some colleges are using to project yield.
Wow.
And one of them that I know is in there, it relates to your point, because I've been told this from a credible source, is, once again, not all schools will do this, but some. How long, not just did you request to be on the mailing list, or did you meet us at a fair, or did you do one of our virtual or in-person sessions, but how long have you been doing that? And what I was told is that the research indicates, and this makes sense, that the person that's been doing that for a year and a half versus the person that's been doing that for 2 months, they're more likely to yield. So that sort of reinforces your point that this is a good time to really start that engagement process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why I think with my clientele that tend to work with me 3 or 4 years, we start to build that list when they come in. So it could be 9th or 10th grade.
And our admissions vernacular is LOR. LOR, letters of recommendation. Often you'll hear LOR instead of LOR. A lot faster to say LOR than letters of recommendation every time you want to talk about the letters of recommendation. So just a little admissions vocab. What's interesting about all these terms is, Vince, some people use them, some don't. It completely depends. Somebody comes up with a shorthand and it might just permeate that one office, or it might spread. Was that ever a term ever used when you were on the other side of the desk?
Oh, absolutely. All the time. Letter of recommendation. On the high school side and the college side, it just was one of those terms that helped bring down the verbiage. So LOR, absolutely. Letter of recommendation. And it's interesting. I think you've talked about this trend before on the podcast, but a lot of schools are still requesting the counselor recommendation and one teacher recommendation, but a lot of schools have dropped a second in terms of requirement.
Yeah, it's just interesting. One of the things I find most fascinating with schools is where they draw the line between getting more upfront information and then having more of a vetted app who has presumably more interest in them, or whether they just want to get apps into the pool. And maybe some schools don't even require the personal statement. And literally somebody could just go check a box. But some people are like, at least we get them in our funnel, and then we can work the funnel and maybe get them on campus. It's very interesting seeing where schools come along that continuum, because they'll all tell you they know they can do certain things to increase apps or decrease apps just based on how many requirements they ask of the student. I mean, there's a direct correlation to how many college-specific essays a college asks and how many applications they get. I mean, even selective schools. I remember one year WashU shared that they added a question intentionally to try to get more vetted, to try to get more pre-screened people that were a match that had really been intentional, and they saw an 18% drop. This is a few years ago. But they said they were okay with that because they were going for that more micro-targeted person that really put the work in. And then other times, I mean, in my interview with Chris Gruber at Davidson, he said they've scaled it back a bit. They've got rid of some of the things that they were requiring, partly because it was the pandemic, but also, just as their own reflection. They're like, why are we putting all these unnecessary hoops on people to make it so hard to apply? Like, just, let them apply. Yeah. And so that's one of the things, right? How many letter recommendations are you requiring? How many essays? How long are the essays? How hard are the essays? I mean, there's a lot of things that a school can do to either make it easier or harder. And then, of course, the ultimate is Georgetown or MIT. Just make them do your own application and really, really make them prove to you that they're serious. But, you have to have a lot of brand strength in the marketplace to get away with that.
Yeah. And Georgetown certainly has a lot of brand strength.
And MIT as well.
Yeah. The MIT one is distinctly different from the common application. And, back to your point with WashU, the first year after the pandemic, they went back to one question. So maybe they saw more of a drop than 18%.
Yeah.
And they said, we're going back to one question.
Or maybe, I had one person tell me they were okay with that. Maybe not everybody was okay with 18. Most people are not okay with 18, and an admission office might be okay, but the people you answer to may not be too, right? That happens all the time.
Yes. Good point. Yeah. We don't know the behind the scenes, but they're back to one question.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. Good stuff. Yeah. And, our boy, I struggled back and forth trying to pick my big number today. There were so many right from this article itself. But I'll go with 827,000, which is the number of community college students that are down since the pandemic. Almost 1 million less students attending community college. And with that, that's a good segue into our article. So I'll summarize it, Vince, and then want to know your thoughts.
Great.
And now it's time for Hot Topics in the News.
So the article is entitled College Enrollment Drops Even as the Pandemic Affects Ebb. And basically it starts out saying that there's a generation of students that may be weighing the value of college versus its cost, questioning college is whether or not it is the ticket to the middle class. And, there's a lot of statistics that are shared in the article. One of the statements that gets made is there a fundamental shift that's taking place toward the value of a college degree. And they draw some data from the National Student Clearinghouse, which indicated 662,000 fewer students enrolled in the spring of 22 than spring of 2021. Overall, that was a 4.7% decrease. The one bright spot was graduate and professional student enrollment, which actually declined as well, but only 1%, not 4.7%. And they quote Doug Shapiro, who's the executive director of the National Student Clearinghouse. And here's what Doug says. He says, the numbers and the breadth of the declines indicate that there is an underlying change. Students are questioning whether college is the ticket to the middle class and to a good job. That suggests it's more than just a pandemic to me. It's more than just a low-income community that's primarily served by community colleges. Dr. Shapiro said during the conference with reporters, it suggests there's a broader question about the value of college and particular concerns about student debt and paying for college and potential labor market returns. And so that's his perspective. But then they indicate the article also gives you an alternative view that comes from Terry Hartle, who's a senior VP of the American Council on Education, one of the major industry association leaders, and he urged caution against the data. So this is what Dr. Hartle says. The numbers are disappointing and troubling, but I'm reluctant to read any major implications into enrollment changes over such a short period of time during the pandemic. The article goes on to say that this disparity in enrollment is not across the board. Flagship public colleges have had more applicants than ever. Regional state colleges are struggling, and so are community colleges. And the article goes on to say that we can't say this is only a pandemic issue because even before the pandemic, college enrollment had been dropping. Part of it was demographic changes that were leading to the number of students leveling off. Part of it was concerns about student debt. Part of it is a highly polarized immigration debate, which had kept international students away for a while. And so the debate goes on. And the article goes on to say that these losses in enrollment are not felt equally across the country. The hardest hit regions in the country have been the Midwest and the Northeast. Now, that's interesting because those areas are also declining in student population in terms of births. They're experiencing more outgrowth. The fastest growing regions in the country are the Southeast, the Southwest, and the West. And the Midwest and the Northeast are experiencing either leveling off or population decline. But it's not only felt there, because the article also goes on to report some recent data from the state of Tennessee. Tennessee said the percentage of public high school graduates who enrolled in college immediately after high school dropped from 63.8%. So in other words, almost 2/3 were going to college, some college, in 2017. And now that number's down to 52.8. So almost 1 in 2. So that's 2021 data. So that's a pretty big drop. You're going from almost 2/3 to almost 1/2. And then, of course, it does go on to say community college is being hit really, really hard. And then it goes on to say numbers felt even strongest amongst black freshmen, which are down 6.5%. So Vince, that's the essence of the article. I'd love to know your thoughts.
Sure. Well, I think we have to look at all the factors. So pandemic definitely played a role in the numbers falling who are applying to university and community college. And I think the flagship schools, we saw an increase there because there was a testing change. Test score sending became optional. And for the flagship schools, that allowed students who might not have considered, for instance, UCLA, to see it within their grasp, because then they would focus on the grades and the rigor and all the other things that they focus on. But in the community college system, the pandemic, I think demographic changes, the number of students in certain regions of the country, the birth rate was declining. I also think that a large part of it, and the article didn't really talk about this, but there was a lot of fatigue with online learning. And I found students taking gap years where I'd never had conversations about that. I had students wanting to go to boarding school where even though the pandemic and COVID was happening, they closed the campus. And so the students could be with one another in a closed community and hopefully not get COVID. So there was a lot of online learning fatigue. And so I think that for students going to community college, that might have put off their desire. Why do I need to spend another year online if I can wait and do it in person in a year? So I'd be interested in seeing if the numbers increase in 1 to 2 years. I think that student debt is definitely a part of it. And as the economy shifts, I wonder how that will impact. So there's two forces here. The economy, we may go into a recession. Online learning will dissipate. It will be more online or in-person learning. And then in terms of the value, I still believe that currently the military and higher education serve as the two institutions for students to move up in terms of social class and to have opportunities. And I haven't really seen anything besides higher education in the military in the United States replace that. So I still believe that is a strong option. The one thing I would say that I also did in doing research for this article, there was a great article in the LA Times about the chancellor, California Community College Chancellor, Elroy Ortiz Oakley, had just resigned, partially because the enrollment in community colleges had dropped significantly. And it had dropped in the same numbers, and California is not having a birth decline. It dropped 10%. So, in my sort of anecdotal experience, when I had students from the high school side try to register to take a class at a community college, I had one student, it took us 6 months to just get through the signing up process and get somebody to call him back. He would go to the campus, they wouldn't be open. I mean, it was 2 students. It was just the process of enrolling was so tough. And if that continues, if the opportunity to enroll is really difficult, that is a significant barrier for students. If it's hard to enroll, they're going to give up and do something else.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of ways in which the country has not fully recovered yet from the global financial crisis back in 2007 and 2008. And a lot of things happened then. I mean, that was really one of the first times where people weren't at a higher percentage, people weren't coming out and getting the kinds of jobs that they were getting prior to that. And that really caused a lot of people to question the ROI, because this has happened simultaneously as states walk away from state funding and colleges more and more pass the cost of college on to parents. So student debt is skyrocketing, and then the flush jobs, not always. A lot of it depends on the college major that you had, and a lot of it depends on, even more than the college major, depends on how well you did the things you need to do, and you had a plan, and you utilized the career center, and you did the internships and did those things, position yourself to be really employable and not just rely on a college degree. But that's a factor as well here, and it plays a role as well in the process. And I think that, I agree with you, Vince, in terms of college and the military. I would say that that's not always the perception. And there's a gap between the perception and the reality. And it's not surprising to me that you see the biggest losses in community college and regional publics for a lot of reasons. Socioeconomically, more often than not, that's a different demographic.
Yes, absolutely.
And so if you've got a parent that's struggling in tough financial times, maybe they've lost a job or whatever, then, and I also think this partly explains why you're seeing even more losses with men and young men than men groomed oftentimes, depending on the culture they're raised, to be breadwinners. You know, some of them have taken that responsibility on to help mom out by, let me go get a job because mom's really struggling, as opposed to delaying gratifications for college. And I also think our decreased attention span hurts. Like the idea of 4 years, when you and I went, like 4 years is 4 years. Like it didn't feel, I think 4 years to some people feels like 7 or 8 just because of the decreased attention span that we're living in. And then also you layer that with the fact that, now this is more recently, but the Great Resignation, one of the things that happened with the pandemic is more and more people said, I'm not going back to work, which, unless I can work from home. And so what that meant is a lot of employers had to really up their games. I mean, Lisa has said that McDonald's in Chapel Hill start at $21 an hour. So you also have a lot of people thinking, wow, I can come out and make $20 an hour at age 18. I can get that car I want. And depending on the family background they're coming from, that may be more money than their father ever made if their father is in the picture.
Right.
So I think all those things are factors. And then I think with the flagships, I think it's more than just they went test optional, because almost the whole country went test optional. I think that, because one thing this article didn't talk about, but we know it's true, and that is the most selective privates were the other group that have seen the surge, right? It's been the most selective privates and the flagships. I think that some of the uncertainty from the global financial crisis that now has people for the first time questioning, is college worth it? I think it's led some people to say, well, you know what? I don't want to take any chance on a non-brand name.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I kind of believe college is worth it, but not all colleges are. And so my best bet is if I can get the brand name, and the brand names are going to be your selective privates and your flagships. And so I think I think that partially explains, maybe it almost exclusively explains, I don't know, but I think it largely explains why you see disparate statistics between flagships and selective privates versus community college, regional publics, and less selective privates. And any thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that value plays a big part in it. And this was a discussion that you had a couple of weeks ago with Julia when you were talking about gap year and transfer.
Yeah.
You see this rush for students who may not have gotten into the flagship. They'll go somewhere, they'll do the best that they can, and then they try to transfer. Or during that gap year, they try to coalesce a series of activities and experiences that might make their presentation different. So again, I think the brand really matters. And for colleges, that's probably the thing that they're trying to increase and protect the most. For those who are already there with a great brand, they're trying to protect it. And then there's those colleges out there that need to build it because parents don't perceive the value. Like, why would I send my student to X college if down the line, nobody knows where that is?
Yeah, no, well said. So Vince, why don't you explain to our listeners some of the ways in which colleges try to protect their brand?
I think that the most significant way that colleges protect their brand is through selectivity.
Mm-hmm.
So
I agree.
The more selective a school is, the more students seem to want to have it. And so you'll see colleges really try to become the most selective they can and try to bring in students through either early decision or early restricted early action, that students are a good match for the brand. I think another way that you see students or colleges try to increase their brand is through marketing. And so they'll buy names and they'll use places like Noel Levitt's and Royal to get their name in front of the research. The research shows them these are the people most likely to enroll in your university. And you see this massive push to get into those communities to recruit those students and try to talk about the things that in those communities are important. So you'll see colleges really try to talk up the things that are strengths. So a few weeks ago when we were talking about Stevens Institute in Jersey, because they're very good at STEM, you saw their brand is increasing. And that was really important. You saw a great university, Northeastern University, go from a certain place in 2000 to today. They're more selective, I think, than BU, because they offered something that people were really interested in, internships and the co-op program. So it behooves the university to improve their brand through selectivity, through research institutions, and then also offering opportunities like STEM or co-op or internships that increase the brand's name recognition in the student side. And I think for the parents, you talk to parents who lived in Boston or the Mid-Atlantic. Northeastern had a certain regional reputation, but now nationally, that has really changed. There are only a few schools where I've seen the brand change as quickly as Northeastern. USC is another school where it changed rapidly over 20 years, but they were very intentional and strategic in trying to do that.
No, I completely agree. And everything you said, really. Vanderbilt underwent a pretty significant change over the last 15 years. And one thing I saw them do, and I've had an opportunity to talk to two in particular past admission officers who confirmed this with me, and it's something I've seen on my side. You've probably seen it. Vanderbilt was frustrating a lot of college counselors because a kid would have a 34 ACT and they'd say not good enough. And they really decided they were going to almost compete to have the highest test score average in the country. I mean, I was looking at their 25th percentile for the math SAT for ED2 last year was a 780. The 25th. And so they used that very successfully. It's not the only thing they did. There's obviously a multi-pronged approach. They're as aggressive as anybody I know at mailing, and they spend a fortune at targeting people through student search. But one thing that happens, and I'm so jaded here that I get a little skeptical. We've all seen this where a school decides to extend its deadline, and I'm talking about fairly selective schools. Now, sure, what they usually say to the public, and no doubt this could be the main reason or a partial reason, is that they have so many applicants, they just really could use a little bit more time to read them. But behind the scenes, my mind can't help but wonder that they're not going to be happy with the application numbers that they're going to have to submit if they cut it off right now. And if they can add another 10 days or even a week, then they can say, look, the most applications ever or the lowest admit rate ever. All of that very intentional part of the brand building. And the part that's, I think, frustrating sometimes is some of the stuff, this stuff actually works.
Yes.
It works. It works so much so to the point where I think you're kind of naive if you just ignore some of this stuff if you're in admissions. I think you have to be somewhat conscious of like you can be as countercultural as you want to be, but the public is pretty locked into thinking more selective, better. Look, I'm not into fabricating numbers. I'm not into recruiting to reject. I'm not advocating for that. But I think that schools need to find a way if they want to increase their yield, and if they want to attract stronger applicants, particularly private schools, because public schools can oftentimes have an access mission and a mission of serving the whole, everybody in their state or serve, but on the private side, a lot of times it's a different shopper with a different mindset than a public, I think the private school that just completely ignores this. Look, I'm not advocating manipulation, so I don't want anybody to get that impression. But I'll just say there's very, very, very powerful forces at work in terms of how the public thinks. And it's very tough to just swim against the tide. This stuff is just really deeply entrenched. Now, there are some things schools can do. One of the things is just to produce great results with your programs that you have and be able to demonstrate that ROI, and if you can show, like, look at our job placement, look at our salaries, look at the career success, that can be one way to combat it. And I certainly have seen schools like Quinnipiac as an example of one that comes to mind. Another one that comes to mind for me is Marquette. Another great example is Elon University. That private schools with higher admit rates, but incredible results in placement and cultures, and they can attract a certain applicant that way. And I respect them highly for that. But that's not easy to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, another good example, I would jump on that bandwagon and say Babson. When you look at the return on investment, I mean, they sit between, I think it was MIT and Stanford in the top 10.
But here's the thing about Babson, though. Like, I love Babson, and I'm always referring Babson. But Babson's admit rate is lower than its selectivity. And they do a good job of discerning who is serious, who's likely to enroll. And I see kids that get in Ivy League schools that don't get in Babson because and most of the time Babson was right, that kid wasn't going there. And then I'll see other kids that, you might be surprised would get in Babson given the fact, I don't know, the last I saw, I think their admit rate is in the 20s now.
Mm-hmm.
But they certainly accept students that may have like 4 B's and an A if they do all the right, if they do all the right things.
Yes.
So I kind of see them being very consciously aware of the fact that we're going to be judged partly by our admit rate. So let's put a little interest in, not just to figuring out who's going to come. I have to give them credit. They have a unique culture, and so they do a great job at figuring out who's the person who's going to be happy here, who's going to thrive here, and who's got that affinity with our mission and our purpose. And I think they have. I mean, I had Courtney Menden on the podcast. I think she's one of the most extraordinary senior level, admissions people out here, and I think she does a really good job and her team of discerning who's really a match for our culture, because we're a niche school. We're 100% business. And there's certain things that we're fantastic at, and there's other things that we don't have. So, but you see things they do. Like Babson is literally, my juniors in January are getting invitations to do their interviews at Babson. So they're figuring out really early. They're testing the interest and stoking and drumming up interest. That's before a lot of people have even filled out an inquiry card or even thought a thing about college.
Yeah. And I've seen for seniors who who've applied, I've seen in the portal, they'll they'll drop an email or within the portal, give you an invitation and then a limited time period to have an interview. And so if you miss it, they assume, oh, they're not looking at their portal or their email. They may not be interested. And then that student gets deferred or waitlisted or maybe even denied because they just didn't respond to that request or that invitation.
Yeah, no, totally. I've got an interview coming up in the next couple months with John Bach instead, and he reveals some really enlightening ways of looking at brand strength in the marketplace with a real data-driven model. And you can kind of see through his research who is it that's used market strategy to drive down admit rates versus who really has that yield power out there. You know, so you'll definitely gonna want to listen to that, because one thing, like people like Vince and I, we get to see who actually gets admitted. So sometimes we can look at an admit rate and we can say, yeah, that feels right. And another time we can look at an admit rate and know that that's almost artificially driven down by clever marketing, because you say you accept 13% or 11% or 16%, but we've all seen kids other than the ones that you might think would be obvious, like a development admit where someone can give an 8-figure gift or a recruited athlete or something. We've all seen, like, there's places that if you're a full pay male and you're like a 3.3, 3.4 student, they'll love you and they'll grab you, even that their admit rate might look like it's getting close to single digits.
Right.
And so there's like tons of need aware admissions going on there. And then there's another place that could have a similar admit rate, and in actuality, it's way more selective.
Mm-hmm.
Which I know makes this all confusing to the public. Well, they're like, well, how, if I can't go by admit rate, what do I go by,
Yeah, well, I think it's important to look at the admit rate, and if you think it's a match, you know where it falls on your list. So is it a wild card, reach, a possible, likely, 50-50, wherever it falls on the list, you know where it is. And I do think that admit rates are helpful, but they're definitely not the last word.
Yeah. They're a pretty good proxy in most instances for how hard a school is going to be to get in. They're a pretty good proxy, but they're not as precise because of the fact that some schools are doing the marketing and doing the strategic positioning that you mentioned. And it's getting more and more and more sophisticated out there, because we live in the world of big data right now, and there's access to analytical data and assessment and analysis that just wasn't around 15, 20 years ago, nowhere near at this level.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But anyway, anything else you want to say, Vince? This was a good one.
I think that's it, but it's great to see you, and I look forward to future conversations and our discussion next month about the University of California.
No, Vince found a fantastic article about how, and we had mentioned this once before, I think I was talking with you, Vince, that the idea had been floated that the University of California may be expanding its size to take on more students. I mean, you live there, so you know the pressure. I work with several students there. I know the pressure people feel, particularly the UCs.
Yes.
Tremendous pressure and tremendous frustration that we've got these great schools here, and I'm paying California state taxes, and I feel like my kid has done really, really, really well, and now I'm getting shut out. So it looks like there may be some changes afloat, but we'll leave that for next month. But come back next month with Vince, third week of every month. Vince is up in the saddle. Or is it? Oh, no, your second week. All right. So, yeah, Susan's first week, your second week, Julia's third week, Dave's fourth. So we'll see second week of August. But keep it up, man. Keep doing good work you're doing there in California, my friend.
Thanks, and great to see you today.
All right, thanks, Vince.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Friends, last week you heard the first part. Now it's time for the second part.
Next question comes from Patty from Illinois. And Patty says, Mark, I listened to your podcast and really like your approach. I have a son who is applying this upcoming cycle, and we are finalizing his college list. My concern is the opposite of most others. He keeps cutting his list and is now left with only 4 pretty similar schools, large state schools out of state. Do you encourage your students to have a more varied, longer list, at least one with less than 20,000 undergraduates, for example, or should I leave well enough alone? I feel like I've stepped back 30 years in college admissions with him when everyone's list could be counted on one hand, but he seems content. He's a likely admit to all if you look at Naviance, but one of the school's acceptance rates is dropping like a rock, putting it up more in the air. Fortunately, it's not one of his top 2 anyway. It's always something with parents, right? We worry a list is too long with no cohesion. We worry a list is too short and similar with no variation. Would love to know your thoughts on this quite possibly non-issue. I live in Illinois, so our in-state comparable option is expensive, especially for business. That's why I'm okay with all of the out-of-state choices. Thanks.
I know you know about that last part, living in Illinois, having expensive.
Wow, yeah.
I don't know what Illinois is doing, and the reason I say that is, I mean, I know what they're doing. Their budget is in shambles, and they've got locked up a lot of money with pensions, and it's a declining population, and K-12 needs money, and everybody, police and cops and, all the other things need money. I get it, but the problem is when you have such an expensive in-state school, then you lose your like a lot of times your most talented people.
Right.
They leave and then they don't come back.
Yeah.
So I just think that any school, if I was running a state, I have to get money to make these in-state schools affordable because we can't have that brain drain. We just can't.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just had to go off on that.
No, I think that, it really became a problem when Bruce Rauner was governor, and there was a lot of contention between him and the legislature. And there was no budget for 3 years and there was no funding for anything. And so they had to jack up tuition and a lot of professors left. And it really just kind of disrupted Illinois, which I think for a long time, lots of people who lived in Illinois would go to like the University of Illinois. That was kind of like the goal, right? And then, things started changing. And so now lots of people are going to like Indiana because it's right next door.
Sure. It's
not that much farther and it's cheaper. So it's just, it's kind of interesting to see that happen.
Look at you. You went all Illinois historian on me. I love it.
Well, it was a very painful time to live in Illinois. Like, being in mental health, all of the social service agencies shut down. Like homeless people came back on the streets. I mean, they're still there. I mean, it just was like things had sort of gone one direction where things were, I felt, getting cleaned up a little bit. And then it just went completely the other direction. But that's because, most Illinois governors end up in jail. And so if Blagojevich hadn't ended up in jail, then we wouldn't have gotten in that situation. But, hopefully J.B. Pritzker will not end up in jail. I'm crossing my fingers for him.
Yeah, you've kind of had an issue there. I've been following that a little bit. That's been interesting.
Yeah, it's like a job description, must be willing to serve time in penitentiary. So
that's insane. So let's get back to this question because I really like Patty's question a lot. And basically, she's saying, does my kid have too few schools? And is it a problem that there doesn't look to be a lot of variety? They're all sort of public schools of 20,000 or more. Financially, she's okay. She's vetted them and they, compared to Illinois, and they're interested in business and they've got differential tuition and people are already paying a lot for business in Illinois. So she's okay with that. But so here's the thing. I'd have some questions that I would ask to get greater clarity. So what I would say is in and of itself, having only 4 schools to apply to if they're high probables is not a problem at all. We talk about the size of the college list, and I said there's so many factors that determine how big that college list should be. That's why it's always, it's such a difficult question. How many big schools should I apply to? There's just so many factors. It's going to be a different answer. If you like your high probables and you're highly likely to be admitted, you don't need 10 schools.
Mm-hmm.
So 4, I mean, I've given this example many times before. Anika's daughter knew she wanted to do animal science, knew she wanted to go to an HBCU. Her mom worked for North Carolina A&T. She'd been on the campus a million times. It was her clear first choice. I remember convincing her to have a few other options just in case she changed her mind at the end. But even that, like, I knew she was highly unlikely to do it, that she didn't really need, and so I think she had 3 schools just to sort of have a little variety there. But so one, I don't have a problem with 4. That's not too few schools for someone who is done their research and they're highly likely to be admitted to 3, let's say 3 of the 4 at least. So that's no problem with the 4. Obviously, she's vetted them for money, so that's a non-issue. So as far as the fact that they're pretty similar, and, I can see what Patty's thinking here. Like, I don't want her missing out on an opportunity. So this is what I would say with that. It's very important that your child has been exposed to a lot of other options.
Right.
That exposure should happen. And by exposure here, I'm talking about more than just virtual. I'm talking about being on campuses.
Right.
And if you have exposed, your child to a lot of different campuses through visiting, like, that would be my question to her if I was here. How many colleges has your son been on the campus?
Right.
Have you exposed him not just to different sizes, but different campus settings as well?
Right.
Have you been at a small city, large city, college town, more remote or rural? Have you done that? Have you been to a school, that's more compressed? But the tighter campus versus more of a sprawling campus, one that's self-contained, one that bleeds in this. I mean, all these different variations. And if you feel you've really done your due diligence with that level of exposure, then I'm okay.
Right. I agree with that.
If you haven't been on that many campuses, then I wouldn't like this approach, because you found places you like, and that's good. I am into trusting your instincts. But you might find something you like even more if there's another thing that you haven't been exposed to.
Right.
And, I'm thinking of the student I'm working with right now from Pennsylvania. He kind of he doesn't remind me of this student in that he only has 4, but he reminds me of it in that he is only liking big schools right now. He likes Penn State. He likes Pitt. He likes Maryland. He likes North Carolina State. He likes Chapel Hill. These are schools he likes. And it's not because they haven't been on campuses. And so I'm still going to challenge him to explore some others and look at them. But I'm fully prepared to accept the fact that he wants to go to a big school. And he's been on enough campuses to know that's what he wants.
Right.
Size is one of those things that people really have a reaction to it.
Yeah. It's so personal.
Yeah, it's very personal. And yeah, I mean, you said it best, because people can go to a small school and it can be like, absolutely not. That is way too small for me. Or it can be like, this is amazing. I love the sense of community. I just feel like this place feels like home. I mean, it's just so personal. So is there anything else you'd like to add to that? Because to me, the main thing is exposure. I'm actually okay with the number.
Right. I think that as long as, we're really sure that's what he likes, and we've, again, visited schools of different sizes and different types of location, and we're determined that he's just a state school kind of guy, and he's looked at the programs, that I would be okay with that too. I mean, not everyone has to have the super stressful, admissions path where you write 8 million supplemental essays and you take their tests, 50 times, and you do it. Like, some people can just do it like pretty simply, and that works for them.
Yeah, and not everybody is like aspiring to something that they, barely can get into or may not get into, and judging success that way. And there's a certain healthiness to not doing that.
It's a little bit more sanity, as long as it's, you're not just like out of laziness saying, I want to go to this, and you're not researching it. But as long as these are the kinds of places I like. I often have parents say, well, but what about putting on this reach school? And, sometimes I'll say to them, well, why? They're not going to get into that school probably. Like it's got like 6 essays. Why are we doing this? I'll do it if you want,
Yeah.
but like if you're, if there's schools that they are excited about, that are great for what they want to do, that they know what they're going to get into, why do you have to like always try to push up, to reach for that star that you're probably never going to get?
Yeah. I mean, I've talked about this before on the podcast. I have 2 or 3 kids every year that as soon as they think they're going to get in, then they lose interest.
Mm-hmm.
And I call it the dog chasing.
Yeah,
I call it the dog chasing the tail.
They have educational intimacy issues.
You would find a psychological category to put that in.
Oh yeah, it's just like men dating or girls dating. Like, oh, he likes me, I don't like him.
I just call it the dog chasing the tail. Right, that's a simpler view. Why do you always have to chase your tail as a dog?
Right.
Isn't it more fun to go find something and actually land something? Mm-hmm. But there is something I want to say about this. So, I've been changing how I present the question of how many colleges is too many. Mm-hmm. One of the things that's informed my thinking is the idea of if it's too many for you to get to and do a really good visit, then that's too many because you're not going to go sight unseen unless maybe you're a Questbridge scholar and they're offering you the world. And, so that's one thing I think about. But the other thing that I really think about is this, and I've been telling people this. If you have 3 high probables on your list that you like, then you're good. Like however many else you choose to apply to, then I'm good with that. Now I do, my view. I generally like to see people get as much good news as bad news because I think these are impressionable times for kids' confidence. And I think your confidence can take a hit if you apply to 15 schools and you get in 2, as I've seen that before. I'm not a fan of that. But for the most part, once you found 2 to 3 that you're highly likely to be admitted and you're comfortable with that, and you're not just telling me that, because sometimes people just tell you that because they understand that their list needs to be balanced. And so they, they're like, okay, these will be my high probables. People use different terms for them. I'm like, no, like, what if you were to go to one of these? Are you okay with that? And they're like, yeah, I'm good with that. I like the schools a lot. Now the rest, it doesn't have to be this perfectly neat, well, I need to have this many, I call them possibles. A lot of people call them targets, and I have to have this number of reach goals or stretch goals. It's not this formulaic thing that we've made it into.
Right.
Like it's so complex and it's so precise, and so there's a part, this is a student that's got, it looks like 3 probables because the one's she mentions gotten a lot more selective. She's not sure of, but she meaning Patty, but sounds like her son that's down his list anyway. Sounds like some of his top schools are ones he's highly likely to be admitted at. I commend him for not playing the chasing your tail game,
exactly.
or thinking that if I'm going to get in, it can't be that great.
Right. Right.
Not defining the quality of a school by how difficult it is to get in. He seems liberated from that.
Yeah.
And more of us need to be liberated from that. It would take a lot of the insanity out of the admission process.
Absolutely. And I have a couple students and they want to they love some schools that are not, incredibly selective, and they could be done in October and they could be thrilled. And, like I'm really happy with that outcome. And I'm also happy that they feel free to pick something, that they love without worrying about that particular type of status that, like, I suppose a low admission rate might confer. And it seems really healthy and sane and balanced. They seem like they're having a good time. You're more likely
to have a good experience. Yeah, you're more likely to have a good experience if you go where you really love. Like love it for who it is,
right?
Not for the trappings that you feel it signals and connotes to certain people.
Right.
And I mean,
right.
like, that's like loving the school for who it is, not for what you feel it signals to somebody. So anyway, this feels like a good situation, but my one caveat would be how much exposure has Patty's son had to schools, not just size. She mentioned that, and I understand why she mentioned that, because all the schools seem like they're all kind of, north of 20,000, out of state, somewhat similar that way. But other areas besides just size? What level of exposure, have you had? And, the other thing I do say to people, applying is not committing to go. It's not. So if there are a few other schools that are maybe on the cusp of, and I'm not, doesn't sound like Patty's son is there, but, well, there's this maybe school. There's not really a harm in applying. If it's at least something that would be, you're open to considering if you were to visit and it were to blow you away. The majority of people that do national searches or even pretty large regional searches, the majority of them don't get to visit all their colleges before they apply. I mean, it's only the people that start the process early and really plan. I even have people that start the process at the end of sophomore year and they still don't get to all of their schools.
Right. It's hard.
Just because it's challenging. It's especially if they're all when they require airfare, and it's a pretty big trip and you're trying not to miss school and you're trying to go when the school is open and it has to work for the parents' schedule. I mean, there's a lot of logistics involved in making that making that thing work for multiple trips. And especially if you have a list where you have like some schools, let's say in 6 hours this way and another cluster schools 10 hours in a different direction. Like those are all major individual trips that have to be taken.
Right.
So, yeah, awesome. Well, Lisa, I was hoping we'd get to question 3, but I'm such a chatterbox. We can pick that up next week.
All right, perfect.
All right, see you then.
All right, thanks.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, the last 2 weeks we've had part 1 and part 2 of our special interview. This will be part 3, which will be the final part of our interview. Listen and enjoy. And education, I see Michigan State constantly, and I know that rankings are subjective and there's different people that do it out there, but when you're consistently at the top by multiple people, you know that it's very, very good. You can quibble about whether you're 3 or 5 or 1 or 6 or whatever, but I know Michigan State is extremely high in a number of education programs, including at the grad school level. What do you want to say about education?
You pretty much said it. Look, our grad program has been number 1 in the nation for 28 consecutive years. I think they call that a dynasty by now, but we're about 2.
You sure you're not into bragging? You're starting to make me wonder about that, John.
I'm just saying, man. Look, we've got
not bragging when it's facts, right?
That's factual, but that's a long time to be number 1. And people often ask, like, what is the difference in what we do? And we were one of the first to create a year-long teacher prep program. We also have what we call our Urban Educator Cohort program to help individuals who think that they want to go into an urban area and teach. We also have a Global Educator Cohort program for those that think they want to go abroad and teach, whether it's ESL classes or just to teach on a particular subject matter. But our education program allows students to begin teaching their first year. So our freshmen are in classrooms teaching. They're in classrooms observing. They're getting exposed to the thing that they want to do, and we do that. We just hired a new dean for the College of Education. His name is Dr. Gerlando Jackson. He's a distinguished professor from UW-Madison and a leading researcher in the industry right now. So we're glad that he's going to be joining us here soon, and looking forward to him really helping us to go to the next level and maintaining that 28 consecutive year record.
And talk to me about engineering. You alluded to it earlier when we were talking about one of the programs that's got, selective and competitive direct admissions. But what else do you want to say? I know every Big Ten school has really strong engineering, but anything you want to say about Michigan State?
We've got 14 different majors in our College of Engineering. It's one of the largest and oldest in the country. We've got options for students to double major or to minor in other subjects that they might have an interest in. We've got diversity programs. We've got one specific for women in engineering that encourages and supports women in navigating a male-dominated industry. We also have a residential program within the College of Engineering. It's called CORE, Cornerstone Engineering and Residential Experience. It's a program for first-year students to really help them understand and explore the world of engineering from a perspective of community and problem solvers. So, when we generally define an engineer, it's someone who solves problems. But a lot of times students come in with preconceived notions about what an engineer can and can't do, or the kinds of things that they've only experienced. So this particular program exposes them to the full world of community involvement and what it means to be a problem solver. So, as an engineer, you learn the technique for how to solve a problem. The question is, can you apply that technique to other areas that may not involve the traditional kinds of things that we think of as an engineer? And I think they do a fantastic job.
That's great. Talk to us about supply chain management, another program that's really strong.
Our supply chain management is number one in undergraduate and graduate programs jointly. Students can earn a bachelor, master's, or PhD. When you think about the crisis that's happening now with supply chain issues, our graduates are in an even greater demand, and they also have a high 90-degree job placement rate following graduation. So just a phenomenal program that really helps students to understand the world in a different way. So I would encourage students who have a mindset for the details and are very highly organized that this might be the kind of program that they consider.
And I have to ask you about agricultural sciences. I remember as a student, the Blue Belly 60 miles down the road there. I remember games they would taunt us, cow college, and all that. So, hey, ag sciences, it's a strong program. What do you want to say?
Ag sciences houses things like ag tech. So for those students who might not want to do a 4-year degree, we have our ag tech program that allows you to get a certification. We've got a unique program that we do jointly up at one of the community colleges up in northern Michigan, and students there can actually build their own drone, and we get them a drone license so they can fly it, but they build it, they learn and get a license to fly it, and then almost instinctively they're able to find work, because now with all of the farming that's available in northern Michigan, especially with the vineyards and the orchards that are up there, you can use those drones to identify problem areas with the crops now a lot faster because you've got the access of the drone. But better than that, you can also treat that one area without having to crop dust the entire field. Or the entire farm. So a lot of unique things like that. We've got some stuff going on with them with vintner, learning to make wine and also doing distilling. Packaging is also a part of
That's
our
true. That's a strong
agricultural
program.
sciences.
Yeah.
But look, we offer production for crops and food science and dietetics, and which is one of the oldest and best programs in the country, as well as nutrition. But the business aspect of ag, um, when you think about it, any area that you really want to work in related to ag sciences, we offer. And that's one of the unique differences about ours. Our program even includes forestry. And we just got a multi-million-dollar grant. This is going to blow you away. We got a multi-million-dollar
Wow.
grant to do work on maple syrup.
Whoa. That's cool.
So, but we've got a robust industry here with our fisheries and wildlife. And so all of those are a part of the program as well, including parks and recreation. I just did yesterday a reference call for an alum who's going to be working for a company that provides experiences that are kind of outdoor excursions to explore the state of Michigan.
Wow.
And this young man spent 11 years in Malawi. I'm sorry, he spent 5 years in Malawi in the Peace Corps and has traveled all over the world. He's traveled like 45 countries and just a phenomenal alum and a great guy, but a great job for him. So he's going to be able to expose people to more of kinds of things that exist here in Michigan. So from ag sciences, everything from the farms to the woods, we got it covered,
Yeah, that was very great answer. And you mentioned this before, but business marketing, last I checked, 18% of all degrees are in the business marketing realm. So any particular programs you want to highlight there, John?
Mostly in our our master's degree area. So we're number one there in the MS marketing for research. We're number one in our business to business marketing research for productivity. But a lot of that trickles down into our undergraduate experience for our students as well, who decide to go into business marketing. But marketing is a lot different than I think some people come to realize. It really has now become more about data and about research and really understanding people's buying habits. How do you sell a company to this particular population versus this particular population? Yeah, we're all in the US, but there's something different about a borough and a township,
Sure.
right? So, but they're heavily engaged, everything from sales and sales management to, as I said, to research, but really top notch program too.
And the last one I'm going to ask you about, I'll ask you about a few special colleges that were special when I was there. I know they are still today. But before we get to that, communications journalism. What do you want to say about this? I know another very strong program.
This one is definitely strong. So we were the first college of communication in the country, and has been leading since 1955. Right now, we're number 3 in the world for communication, number 1 in communication and media studies, number 6 in game design. We've got 20 different programs under the college with about 3,200 students enrolled, and you know, this is just one of those things where we have state of the art facilities. And if students are really interested and want to hone their craft, I mean, we've even got a news studio where students can actually go in and practice their storytelling abilities to become news anchors. As a matter of fact, I'm working with them on a project now to do something specifically for admissions and recruitment.
Oh, that's fantastic. That is great. Well, let's talk about 3 very special colleges that Michigan State has. My biggest regret is that I never either, was in the honors college. I wish I would have applied. I did well. I just didn't really know that much about it. Or James Madison, which I think I would have absolutely loved. So talk to me about 3 things: the honors college, James Madison, and Lyman Briggs.
So, our honors college is also one of the oldest in the country and serves some of the brightest students in the world. Some unique things about it: students have an opportunity to do research directly with professors coming in their freshman year. And you don't have to be in the honors college to do that, but those individuals have more direct contact to faculty to do that through the honors college. Additionally, they don't quite have the same set of curricular requirements that some of the other students do. So when you think about traditional plan for prerequisites, you've got to take these series of courses. All of theirs is completely flexible. So regardless of what their major is, they have the ability to self-select and now can explore more options through the honors college. Additionally, there are not specific honors college courses that they have to take. They can take their regular courses and make them an honors option by doing some additional work, and they just work that out with the faculty member. And we found that our students really love that kind of flexibility coming into the honors college. But it's a great program, and I'm glad to see that we are also pushing on increasing access to diversity for students from there. So this year we've got more than 800 new honors college students joining us from all over the world. So traditionally we've got somewhere between 600 and 700. So this year we're looking to a much bigger group.
Great. And talk to us about James Madison and Lyman Briggs. In fact, I just had one of my students visit you last week and had a fantastic visit, and they were very interested in these schools. So
Sure.
particularly the honors college. And I also told them to check out Lyman Briggs.
So James Madison and Lyman Briggs are 2 of 3 of our residential colleges. And residential colleges are a little different than residential programs. Residential colleges, you can actually earn a degree. And so students here, they enjoy discussion-based learning classes in James Madison, and they're connected mostly through majors in the area of public policy and public affairs. But it's small class sizes. They've got access to advisors and faculty in the same building that they live in. There's a dining facility in that building. There's workout facility in that building. There's some additional classroom spaces that only they can occupy. And they get an opportunity to live in a community with individuals that are interested in that. And so they typically do that their first year at Madison, but they can stay longer if they choose to. in Lyman Briggs, it's science focused in terms of that, and they've been around since 1967. But their focus is to connect the natural science and mathematics with humanities and social science. So these students get an opportunity. You heard me talk earlier about we're about people. So this interdisciplinary piece that helps them, if you will, develop a different perspective on maybe the bedside manner, or even the research side matter. So I think it's a really unique thing that they do, but students have an opportunity to be in smaller lecture hall classes, um, as well as smaller lab classes, because the majority of their classes, not all of them, are taken in Holmes Hall, where Lyman Briggs is housed. But same kinds of things: access to faculty, access to advising, access to a residential dining hall, access to workout facilities. So, you wake up late, you can roll out of bed, roll into class, potentially in your pajamas. Just hopefully you brush your teeth.
Yeah, you got to brush the teeth. Nobody want to get within 8 feet of you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
Friends, the recommended resource for episode 247 is the book Countdown to College, 41 to-do lists and a plan for every year of high school. Now, this book is another one of the great books produced by Ed Fiske and his partner, Bruce Hammond. And you know how much I'm a fan of the Fiske Guide to the College. I recommend that's got to be in everybody's college library. But they produced some other companion volumes together, and this is an outstanding one. I will say this. I do wish the book would release a new update. The last version came out in July of 2018. Obviously, we've had some changes in several things in college admissions since then. But nevertheless, the book is still very good and worth purchasing. So what they do is they break the college process down into a series of lists of things that you need to do. And what I love about it is the lists are broken down by year. So you have your 9th grade list, your 10th grade list, 11th grade list, and 12th grade list. So just to give an example, in the 12th grade, they'll have a section, early decision versus early action, and a bunch of things you need to consider if that's where you're at right now. Or scholarship search and things you need to consider. Financial aid process, things you need to consider. After acceptances for students. Handling the wait list, and a bunch of things that you need to consider. Those are all things in the 12th grade. Other things in there are getting to know your admission officers, getting informed about the performing arts application process. Those all have lists of things you need to do if that pertains to you. And then, of course, that's 12th grade. If you go back and you get into the younger years, then you get into things like understanding honors AP IB courses. That's under the 9th grade category. And then you have other things. Another example would be cost of college and exploring that. They put that in 11th grade. I personally would put that earlier than that if I was them, but still fantastic book. I recommend it. And one example of how it's outdated is there's a chapter called Get Informed About SAT Subject Tests, which we know have been obsolete for the last couple of years, but it's still very good. Another list I like is called The Top 5 Myths About College Admissions. That's a really good one. So the book is called Countdown to College, 41 to-do lists and a plan for every year of high school. It's a book I've had for quite some time, and I'm kind of embarrassed that it's taken me this long to recommend it. We'll now return to the final segment of my interview with John Ambrose of Michigan State University. So John, almost 40% do research at Michigan State and almost 40% to study abroad. I mean, it's amazing how, improvements have been made in those areas since the 80s. How do students get these opportunities? What's that process like?
It's open to everybody, Mark. So we are doing we want more students. I'd like to see this number go to 60, 70% that our students are participating in these opportunities. But you got to fight the stigma a lot. And I think we've been doing that by word of mouth as students hear, like you don't have to speak English in order to go and study. You don't have to speak the language or native tongue of that country to go over and do study abroad. in almost every situation, English is taught on the campus in that particular class that you would be studying. Now, once you get off campus, it's a different story. But just being immersed in that different kind of culture. So we were number one for a while for public universities for study abroad, but we're still in the top 10 now. And so we continue to push that as a piece for students to do. But with the pandemic, that number dropped a bit. So we're hoping as we come out now and in this vaccinated time that we're going to see more students going back into that and taking advantage of those opportunities. We have scholarship money available for students depending on the program of study that they want to do. You can also do study away. So I don't know, maybe you applied to Georgia Tech or something. And so, you ended up coming to Michigan State, but you decide you'd like to go and study away for a semester at Georgia Tech. You can also do something like that in our study abroad program. In terms of research, we have an undergraduate research fair. And it's amazing to see the things that students are working on. So you don't just have to be in a science major to be working on a research project. And I think students are much more prepared for the world of work if they do research and they do study abroad or education abroad. So if they do those two things before they leave MSU, I guarantee you those individuals will never look for a job.
Love it, love it, love it.
Just the ability to solve problems, break them down, come up with solutions, figure out how to find solutions to problems, I think is incredible. And then with the education abroad, sometimes you don't know the full capacity of what you're capable of in terms of communication until you go to a country where you don't speak the tongue. And you've got to survive. You got to figure it
Yeah.
out, and you do. And I think you're always impressed with yourself when you come back from there and you go, you know what? I survived. I did that for 3 months. I didn't know anybody. I was there, maybe with a few friends from the university, but what a great way to learn more about yourself and just expand and to grow not only your interests, but, the thoughts about what you can do as a human.
Yeah, and it just shapes your whole worldview. It's just
Yeah.
completely shaped from having more myopic to being more global.
Yeah.
So you had mentioned before, being at the airport, go green, go white. It's funny. I just recently interviewed Steve Robinson, who's at Lansing Community College. He's the president over there, and he's a Michigan State alum, and his kids are as well. And we talked about the same thing. Go green. He ended my interview with me. Go green, go white. So there's that thing about Michigan State, this school spirit. It just gets in the blood, especially men's basketball and football. Right now, obviously, there's a tremendous buzz with Mel Tucker and what's going on with football. Talk to us a little bit about how that shapes the experience of students, not only once they're at Michigan State, but even the bond it creates with alumni for the rest of their lives.
When I was at Western, I fought hard to, drive the spirit of the Broncos and just, I got an opportunity to visit Purdue and IU, and I came back on a mission that I wanted to try to invigorate that kind of an attitude on our campus, because on any given day at Western, you could see students walking around with some other university shirt on. And at Michigan State, that's a rare thing. You almost will never walk by anybody wearing anything but Michigan State. You will see a lot of students wearing Spartan gear. There are other college and campuses and universities you can go to, and you will pass a lot of students, but they will not be wearing the university gear. You may see the same experience of what I talked about at Western at different campuses, and I've experienced that and I've seen it. I don't know where it emanates from, but that Spartan spirit is deep and it is long. And as I mentioned, no matter where you go, you're going to hear it. That go green. And when you hear it, your response from that call out is supposed to be go white. The impact that I think athletics has had on the Spartan Nation has been incredible. We've seen institutions that have not quite had that, and all of a sudden, there's this huge surge in the spirit around the institution. Like when Oakland University made it to the tournament all of a sudden Go Grizz or the Grizzlies were everywhere. You could see OU, you know, in a bunch of new places, and those alums started to really kind of come out of the woodwork and were proud to advertise their place. Michigan State has been very fortunate to have Tom Izzo and now Mel Tucker, and even our new athletic director, Alan Haller,
Yeah, he's great.
to be a part of what is now this next move or next path in the journey for Spartan athletics. But you wanted to ask me how it impacts us. I've never seen, at least in my experience, as many fans that will travel not just with men's basketball and football, but with women's hockey or with the track team or with the golf team. Spartans are fanatic for Spartans, and we support, and they support our athletics programs. So they would be nothing without the alums and the fans that support them. And I think for students who are looking for a college experience, you very much, when you think about college in the very simplest of terms, you think about going to a football game where the stadium is packed. You think about going to a basketball game where the stadium is packed. If you come to Michigan State, you're going to always be at a home game. The stadiums are going to be packed. When our Spartans are competing on the hardwood or out on the field, you're going to see packed stadiums, and I think that's appealing to students. They want that to say that they were a part of something like that. Yeah, it's cool to be on ESPN and game day and all of that. We get our fair share of television time. We don't get what some of the other big schools get, but I think we get a fair share, and I'd like to see us get a little bit more as we move forward. But winning is required to do a lot of that, and I think Mel Tucker and Coach Izzo give us a unique opportunity because it's rare to be at an institution where you'll have a winning basketball coach and a winning football coach. So this is a great time to be a Spartan.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I mean, not only was it tremendous fun for me, not only did it provide work-life balance, but you could go anywhere in the country. I could be in Portland, I could be in Seattle, I could be San Diego, you name it, San Antonio. You could find a Michigan State sports bar. You could go watch a game, and I'll tell you what. Next thing you know, business cards are passed out and people are hooking up other Spartans. I think it's very underrated, the bond it creates. You mentioned Georgia Tech earlier. I've had conversations with Rick Clark, their undergrad director of missions, about this too, because Georgia Tech, for a high-powered tech school, they're going up against the MITs, the Carnegie Mellons, and Caltechs. They don't offer that. But there's this bond that it cements within the alumni, and it's actually really good for job networking, as well.
So we've been talking about this whole thing with people, right? So I was talking to a student, and this just hit me. I was talking to a student the other day, and we were talking about the tailgating at Michigan State versus with our friends down the road. And so she said, this was a student. She said, when I was looking at the two schools, my parents took me to a tailgate at both places. She said, at the Michigan State tailgate, every time we walked past anybody's party, they invited us in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That didn't happen down the road.
It's a friendly place.
That spirit of friendship, opening up, offering food, offering drink, just being hospitable, just saying hi, just connecting with people. That's the Spartan will. That's the Spartan spirit.
Well, that's a good place for us to transition to our lightning round, which is, John saw this. He's like, "What's this lightning round hot seat?" Almost backed off my interview, But we have a tradition. No first-time guest ever comes on your Cosbound Kid without going on the lightning round. So you're ready? You got to trust me. You don't know where I'm going on this one.
All right. I'm ready.
Okay. If you had to live in a state other than Michigan, where would you live?
It's not quite a state, but Washington, D.C.
That counts.
Not there in North Carolina.
We'll count it. Hey, I've lost both my daughters to North Carolina. So both went to college there and said I'm staying. So what can I say? I love it. If a billionaire said, "I want to buy any car for you want, John. You've done amazing stuff for Michigan State. You name it. It's yours to buy." What would you pick?
I'm not a big car guy, but what would I pick? I'd probably pick the 2-seater convertible BMW.
There you go. There you go. You might become a car guy if you had that. You
Definitely.
can't be in education. You have to have a completely different profession than education. What would you pick?
Mentoring or coaching.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
What any sport? Any idea what sport you coach?
No, it would be professional coaching.
Oh, professional coaching. Professional
Yeah.
coaching. There
Yeah.
you go. There you go. There you go.
Yeah. Coaching
Sounds a
young
sneak
professionals.
way of doing education because you're still being, using those educational skills, but we'll let that count. We'll let that
You
count.
got to take your skills with you. You take your best assets and you make them work, man.
Sure.
You can cook
There
in
you
any
go.
kitchen, indoor,
Applying that marketing and hospitality and all those skills over there. I see.
Exactly. You got to be able to cook indoors or outdoors, man.
There you go. You could meet anybody in the world for lunch, alive or dead. Who you picking? I know that's a tough one.
Jesus Christ.
There you go. There you go. It doesn't get
I'd
better
love to
than
have
that.
lunch with Jesus.
There you go. Awesome. Good stuff. Best restaurant in East Lansing. Someone says, I'm visiting this Michigan State. I really like what I've heard John say. Where do you recommend they grab a meal?
They got to do 2 stops. First one's going to be Brody, just so that they can experience the dining facility. The
Sure.
second one's going to be just a good old Midwest hamburger at a place we call the Peanut Barrel.
How long has that been there?
A good little while. I'm not sure. I know it was there before
It
me.
could be my memory. It could be my memory.
It's on Grand River, so it's quite.
And I remember Grand River. That was the place.
Well, people talk about Crunchies too, but I'm a Peanut Barrel guy. I like their burger better.
Good stuff. You're making me hungry. And my last question for you: best advice for students, parents, and college counselors. So it's my last one. So I get a trifecta in.
Best advice for students: be the young adult with your parents that you really want to be, which means you've got to change your behavior a little bit in order to get your parents to hear you. Parents, be better listeners of your students and start moving them towards the friend you want them to be as an adult and not the child you expect them to be as an adult, so that you can meet them halfway and help them make better decisions. But clearly, the two are not always talking.
Sure.
For best advice for guidance counselors, hang in there. Self-care is important. Our work is tough. At times it's been called God's work. But the reality is we often get a chance to see some things in the growth of our young people or our young scholars that others do not. So the rewards always outweigh the work. It's just a matter of putting in the work to see the reward. So hang in there. A lot of people are supporting you even though you don't see them or talk to them. But I appreciate all of the work that they put in with our young people and the young scholars across the globe. The work, again, is not easy, but we need people like them to encourage these young people who are a bit more fragile on the outside, but they've got some scars on the inside we can't always see. You and I grew up with bicycles and we didn't have to wear helmets and knee pads, and it shows on the outside. But the kind of pain that they've experienced, we have too. But theirs is a bit more intense just because of, they're not used to a lot of things. But they need good guidance counselors who will stand in the gap for them, tell them the truth, and really help them along the way. So I know the work is tough. Oftentimes the loads are a little larger than you want them to be, but keep leaning in and take care of everyone that you can. Even if you can't get them all, get what you can get.
John, this has been awesome, and you've been most generous with your time. You've been worth the wait since 2019. This is great, and I really appreciate it. Could you share Michigan State's website and anything else? Like sometimes people say, oh, we've got a really good Instagram, anything else that you think would be a good resource for people to get to know Michigan State better?
Admissions.msu.edu. From there, you'll be able to springboard to anywhere on the university's web pages to really help you out in terms of figuring it out. I think we've got a really good Instagram page. So you can find MSU there with, I think it's Michigan State, and they can find it.
Question: Are you going to do either NACAC or College Board for conferences?
I am, Mark, in this new role. I am invested in the campus right now, so
okay.
As we mentioned about communication earlier, I think it was Lauren that asked that question about, the communication and the Autobots.
Yes.
It's important for me to make sure that stuff is working for our constituent audience. So I'm going to phase out and sit still for at least a year. And hopefully I'm going to be able to get enough done that I can get back and be connected to the rest of you all. But I know you understand. So
Most definitely. Most
yeah.
definitely. Well, I was going to say I'll catch you on the road, but I guess I just have to come to EL and see you at the home turf. And
come on to East Lansing any day you want, and let me know, and I'll get you over to the Peanut Barrel and get you a rodeo burger, man.
I'm taking you up on that. You think I'm
Come
kidding?
Come on.
Awesome. Thanks, John. I really appreciate your time, my friend.
All right. Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it. Go green.
Go white. Friends, if you didn't hear last Monday's episode, which would be 246, I really encourage you to go back and listen to that first before you listen to part 2 of Lisa's fantastic interview with Marshall Gentry, who's served for several decades in student life and dean work at multiple schools, including Middlebury, Yale, and his alma mater, the University of the South, also known as Sewanee. In this interview, Marshall basically shares 10 areas where, I like to say, the train gets off the tracks, where people get derailed, where students make some big colossal mistakes that can either cause them to not graduate or sometimes even more serious than that, have some ongoing significant life problems. And so last week, Marshall introduced the first half, and this week he covers things such as cannabis and drugs, including prescription drugs, consent for physical contact, sexual advances, the Violence Against Women Act, unhealthy eating and sleeping habits, the importance of staying active, taking advantage of counseling center, unexpected changes in your child's appearance. What does that mean, and how do you handle that? It's just a fantastic interview, and I really hope you'll tune in with us on Monday. Friends, I'm almost always, whenever I remember, I like to end with one of two really famous quotes. And I'm someone who likes to give attribution for quotes, not just to share quotes, but give attribution. So the quote I'm going to leave with us with today, college is a match to be made, not a prize to be won. That comes from Frank Sachs. So who's Frank Sachs? Well, he is a college counselor who spent 37 years at the Blake School in Minneapolis. More than 20 of those years as the director of college counseling. He's a past president of the Minneapolis NACAC, and he's also a past national president of NACAC. But he's most famous for this quote. So shout out to Frank Sachs for giving us one of the true jewels in the business. It's not about trophy hunting. It's about finding the right match for your child. See you on Monday, everybody. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us, and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 14. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joyce Ducker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stelianos Dimitriou. If you want to have a coaching session with Lisa or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcasts. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Thursday.